30 seconds.
Well, Rob's being awful quiet this morning.
Yeah. Well, his kids attacked him when he got home
Yeah.
last night. He didn't get any sleep. He got loved to death till, what, 1 in the morning?
Yeah.
Playing games with the children.
All right. Get started. Welcome to the Grand Traverse County Resource Management and Administration Committee. It's February 9th, 2011, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if we could have the roll call, please.
Commissioner Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Fleece?
Present.
Max Bauer? Here. Thomas?
Here.
Henschel?
Here.
Inman?
Here.
Gilman?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
And Limcool is excused.
And first item is the approval of the minutes.
Move for approval as presented.
Support. Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, can I, oh, yes, I'm sorry. You'd think I was the one out late.
That was aye for approval, or?
Yeah, it was I for
Okay,
approval,
thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
That was aye. Voted 3 times.
I was having bad.
I know, I'm sorry.
Okay, and now we have our opportunity for first public comment. I'd like to read the rules.
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. Chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak.
Okay, and do we have anyone who'd like to give public comment at this time? Okay, seeing no one, let's move on to approval of the agenda.
Move we approve the agenda.
Support. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, agenda's approved. We have no special orders of business, so next item would be the consent calendar.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file. Number 1, Health Department Year-End Report, January through December 2010. Number 2, Community Corrections Monthly Report for January. Number 3, Commission on Aging Monthly Report Year-End 2010 and January 2011. Number 4, Road Commission Monthly Report. Number 5, Grand Traverse Conservation District Monthly Report. Number 6, Housing Liaison Monthly Report and Program Status. Approval. Land Information Access Association Renewal Contract. Number 2, Consolidating Purchasing Agreement for Custodial Chemicals Facilities. Number 3, Procedures for Appointments to Boards and Committees, Resolution Number 297 of 2010. Number 4, Adoption of Board Rules.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to have any item of the consent calendar removed for discussion? And anyone on the board wish to remove anything? Commissioner Maxwell?
Number 2 under approvals, please.
Okay, that would be the consolidating purchasing agreement.
Yes.
Okay, we will put that under unfinished business then. Anyone else? Commissioner Gilman?
I have some questions on the Road Commission's monthly report. The
A4, please.
Okay.
And then number 4 on approval.
The adoption of the board rules.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyone else? I take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve the consent calendar with the exception of A4, B2, and B4.
Support.
Okay, by roll call, please.
Commissioner Fleece?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Henschel?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Gilman?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Richardson?
Yes. Motion is carried. Okay, that takes us to Human Resources, the MERS transfer provision.
Good morning, Jen Seaman, Human Resources Director. We received a notice from MERS on February 11th that they have adopted a new transfer provision. And what this means for Grand Traverse County is all of our different bargaining units have different groups within the MERS system. So groups would be the right way to say that. And if someone transfers from one group to another, MERS is looking to, if they change groups, then they would have to go into a different retirement plan. And right now, if a defined benefit, say for example in the Sheriff's Department, if a defined benefit employee moves from a deputy to a sergeant, or gets promoted from a deputy to a sergeant, or a sergeant to a lieutenant or a captain, they can keep their defined benefit retirement plan. MERS has said that we can still do that with approval of the board. Or what they have proposed is that what they're looking at is that if you get promoted, like in the Sheriff's Department, that you'd have to go to the defined contribution plan. So I'm here today to discuss that with you, as we would like to, personally, we've had a lot of promotions within the Sheriff's Department lately. This is one area that this is going to impact, as well as Teamsters General to our AFSCME group, because that would be the supervisory group. If someone were to get promoted, then they would have to switch from the retirement divisions, and especially in the Sheriff's Department, that might prohibit people from getting promoted or wanting to get promoted if they have to switch retirement divisions. So that's all I...
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that the board move forward and approve the municipal employee retirement system, that the employee transferring from a different bargaining group would be allowed to stay within the MERS retirement system, defined benefit program.
I'll support that.
Okay, motion support. Dennis?
Jen, I apologize, I didn't talk to you about this, but I have a couple of questions about this. First of all, several of the commissioners have called me and talked to me about this as well. And I think it's important for the commissioners to understand that what this does is it basically, the option that we have if we don't adopt this is that an employee who transferred and was promoted, let's say from deputies to sheriff, or to sergeants, okay? If they were in defined benefit and deputy, they would have to go in defined contribution as a sergeant. So if they had less than, they weren't vested, in fact, they would lose that retirement. You know, they'd keep their portion, but they'd lose their retirement piece that the county put in. Well, what that would interpret for us is that would probably end up being a cost savings for us, because we'd be moving people out of the defined benefit program. On the other side of the coin, for that employee, it's hurting, you know, they were in a defined benefit program, and it hurts their ability to build up a retirement. Now, they'd still build a defined contribution retirement to go along with that. And as I think about it, defined contribution, that became mandatory for everybody 10 years ago, I think, now. So everybody's vested who's in defined benefit. Okay, no one else except in circuit court. And as Jen and I talked, the important thing here is that, like in the Sheriff's Department, you know, there might only be a small pool of people that the sheriff feels are qualified enough. they may not be willing to jump for a promotion of $3,000 or $4,000 to lose their defined benefit, their benefit if we don't adopt something like this. But so that's kind of what's going on here. The questions I have, though, Jen, two questions, and I think I've asked this before years ago, but why can't we petition MERS to meld all our employees that are in defined benefit into one defined benefit plan? Why do they have to be separated out into 13 different groups? And there's a couple reasons I ask that. First of all, that would solve this problem. And secondly, it could improve our pool in some ways if we're combining everybody. I think that would be at least worth researching. And then the second question that I have, and this was in discussion with Commissioner Richardson, who called me, and that was, what happens if we don't? I mean, they didn't give us a deadline on this, and the part that's concerning to me on this is you have a one-time decision to make. It's irrevocable. Once you make the decision, you can't go back. Isn't that correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's, and so I'm not comfortable making a decision until we make sure we've got all your questions answered and then a couple of mine before we do this. And there's no timeline on it, so I don't really see the rush to do this today until we've kind of asked whatever questions some commissioners might have, And I'd certainly like to explore that idea of why we can't combine into one unit, but that's my thoughts on it.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Well, I think the idea of combining into one unit would save us a whole lot of headaches with our whole actuarial and all of those kind of things, if that's possible. But, for example, in the Sheriff's Department, we've had, 5 promotions in the last month and a half,
Yep.
last 6 weeks, because of some retirements and different things. And, to go now and tell those guys, oh, by the way, when you accepted that position as a sergeant, your retirement program is all completely revamped. All of these people that get promoted are vested. That's not an issue because they have longevity with this county in order to be eligible for the promotions. And, for us to say, okay, nobody in our deputies unit or nobody in our lieutenants unit is willing to take Tom Emerson's position when he retired because they don't want to go from defined benefit to defined contribution. So we've got to try to go outside and hire a captain to run our road patrol. That just doesn't make any sense at all. I have no problem with tabling it until we get more information because, I just think this is a bad decision on MERS' part.
Can we, at some point, just cut it off and do a partial on the defined benefits and just say this is where we are from going forward? Is that something we can do based on our contracts that we have right now?
No, you mean...
literally just get rid of just straight out cut it off, say you're going to have a certain percentage of your defined benefits from this point on, or something based on your years of service to this point, but from here forward, the county is going forward with a defined contribution plan and everybody's on the same plan. Because, I tend to think that there are, when you're talking about the sheriff, and it'd be nice to have his opinion here, actually. When you're talking about somebody who's making a decision, a career decision, whether or not they want to advance, well, you definitely shrink the pool if they're also smart enough to know that they're going to lose a little bit on the money side. And
I think the answer is I don't think we can, we can change the retirement system and look at doing something different with it, but it has to be negotiated with every unit.
Correct. And the defined benefit, just so clear, is closed now.
Except for circuit court.
Except for circuit court. Yeah, no one can go into the defined benefit program.
I'm talking about even beyond, going beyond that, maybe paying them off or paying,
limit their future, our
Yeah,
future.
that would have to be
Right,
negotiated,
right.
yeah.
Commissioner Mathcon?
Refresh my memory, didn't we create a sergeant's position recently? And when the numbers were given to us, weren't the numbers given to us saying that we should create this because it's a defined contribution position, not a defined benefit position?
I think that they use defined contribution as the estimate. It's like three-quarters of our employees are in defined contribution.
I understand that, but we created this position based upon numbers that were given to us, and those numbers were defined contribution, not defined benefit. And we put that in, we adjusted our
Right.
budget accordingly. And now we're being told, well, employees might not want to take that position. Well,
Well, but Commissioner, we only use that for budget estimates. No, if an employee is a defined benefit employee who gets that position, that money will basically move from the pool of money that was in his defined benefit as a deputy and will be transferred over to cover as a sergeant. That's how that works. And it might be a little bit off, but that's how it works. There's no way around that. So we always estimate it at defined contribution because 3/4 of our employees are. But yes, a defined benefit employee could take that position, and we would have to jockey money around within the sheriff's department to cover it.
And we should note that some of the members of the sheriff's department are on defined contribution.
Oh, 3/4.
Without question.
Well, I know.
But I think the one thing that we have to remember is even when we promote an officer who, if we talk specifically about the sheriff's department, who is going to be promoted to the rank of sergeant, his replacement in the deputy pool is on defined contribution.
Exactly.
So, just to clarify, Jen, the way it works right now is that if someone who's on defined benefit is promoted into another division, they take the defined benefit with them.
Right, there's no change to them.
So what MERS is saying is, you have to make a one-time decision to either continue to allow that or to not allow it.
Correct.
And assuming we can trust MERS that, their one-time decisions are one-time decisions. Inman and then Commissioner Henschel.
To me, the unanswered question doesn't play into, in my mind, doesn't even play into the decision today. I mean, if we say today, and we make a recommendation to the board at the end of the month that if you're in a defined benefit program and you take a promotion, you can stay within that defined benefit. And then we find later that we can combine the pools. That does not take away the action that we took. I mean, it has really nothing to do with it. I mean, we're allowing these people to transfer into another position and keep the defined benefit. It's a whole different issue about whether MERS would allow us to pull all the bargaining units and everybody else into the deal, and if there's an advantage there. I mean, that's a whole different question. It wouldn't even interfere with this. I don't want to be waiting around for things to occur. We can't fill positions because, we're not going to make this decision. I mean, I just move forward with it. And as far as I'm concerned, we've already made the hard choices. We've said we're no longer going to offer defined benefit for employees that are employed from 2001 moving forward. I mean, and, we got ourselves a 16-year amortization. We've got a budget for it. I say we move forward.
So you don't agree with Dennis's idea that maybe we should just not do anything on it for the time being?
I don't see how it changes the picture.
Because basically we're just validating what we're already doing.
Right. I mean, if you want to combine bargaining units, that's fine.
Okay.
For MERS, but it has nothing to do with this decision.
Yeah. Commissioner Henschel.
To my knowledge, I don't think we're having a real big trouble filling positions in any department. I think people like to have a job here. We're a good place to work for. My question is this something that has to be a blanket policy for our entire county?
Correct.
Okay, it can't be split between this department has this, okay.
That's a good thought.
And maybe I'm, going way out of bounds here, but what happens if somebody, say, who works for circuit court gets a better job somewhere else in the county? Would that not be considered a promotion?
If they get another job in the county, right now, their defined benefit would move with them.
Right.
If this is
The
not
issue-
adopted, then,
Yeah,
yeah.
the issue we've had in the past is when an employee gets promoted from a different unit to the circuit court. Every employee in the circuit court is in defined benefit. So if an employee is in district court under defined contribution and gets promoted to a position in circuit court where everybody's defined benefit, what are they?
And what has happened when?
It's only happened once to my knowledge, and they kept what they had in defined contribution and entered defined benefit.
Okay. So basically their defined benefit started at that point?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Fleece?
Your recommendation is to approve this?
Yes, I believe that the employees have that defined benefit retirement, and that had been bargained for in the past, too. The employees made decisions in the past whether to stay with defined benefit or defined contribution, and in terms of recruitment, where I think it would impact us is a lot of the times the more senior employees are the ones that get promoted, and those are the ones that have the defined benefit, in the sheriff's department. And that's where I was referring to it, Rob, just to clarify. But yes, I do believe that this would be appropriate for our employees, and I think it would do a lot for, keep up with employee morale and their benefits.
So we have a promotion in the sheriff's department, and the employee being promoted is on defined benefit.
Mhm.
If we pass this, what would happen?
They would have to go to defined contribution.
And what happens to the
No,
asset?
not if we pass the motion.
No, if we
Well,
pass it,
if you pass, sorry. Yep.
Pardon?
If you pass it, they would stay with the defined benefit program if they get promoted. If you don't pass it, then they would have to go to the defined contribution. Their defined benefit retirement would end, and they would pick up on defined contribution from that point forward.
And what happens with the assets in the defined?
They're
benefit?
frozen.
It's frozen?
Mhm.
So how did they do the computation when that person retires?
I don't know those details. They usually use your last few years of service and your salary at that point, so maybe it would be the last few years of.
Last 3 out of 5?
Of, that you
Times
were,
years of service.
when your defined benefit ended. So if it ended in, 2008, for example, and you retired in 2012, then they'd probably use 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008 as your high wage earning years for your defined benefit calculation.
But Jen, is that an
versus-
assumption? Or
That's an
do you know?
assumption,
We would have to
assumption,
check that,
absolutely.
Commissioner. I'm not.
Yeah,
Well,
I would have to
think-
choose, look into that, but.
I think perhaps we should table this and bring it back after we've had some of these questions answered, because if you had an employee that has been in the position they were in the right position to accept a promotion, he could be a rather youthful employee, and all of a sudden he's in defined benefit, he ends up in defined contribution, and he doesn't retire for 10 or 15 years, that retirement's almost worthless at yesterday's dollars. And I saw this happen with MERS way back when the city had employees that ended up $200 a month.
Commissioner Fleece, is that a motion to table?
Already
We
have-
already have a
Yeah,
motion.
I would make a motion that we table this until we get more information and get some questions answered.
Actually, a table means you're going to discuss it later in the meeting. You have to defer it to another meeting.
I would make a motion that we defer it to our next RM&A meeting.
You declare the,
You already have a motion to approve it, so, I would be happy to withdraw my motion if the second is to do so. We can table it to next month's RMA.
Well,
Yeah, we can table this for further discussion because there's not a timeline per se on when we have to make the decision. I guess my point is, we have employees that are willing to take supervisory
we-
positions because they're confirmed that they have a defined benefit. And if we all of a sudden tell them, hey, look, you can take the supervisory position, but you're going to lose on your retirement,
Ain't gonna happen.
we're not going to fill those positions.
No. Is there a pending issue with any employee that is trying to make a decision based on this action? Do we have some pending positions that are waiting to hear from us?
I'm sure we do.
And if we have some
Sheriff's
pending
office.
ones, I want to continue to move forward with the motion.
Not everyone in the sheriff's office that has been promoted has started their new position yet. The sergeants they
By
promoted
delaying
last
delaying
week.
it for another 30 more days, are we going to put someone on the spot in terms of trying to get things done down there?
Could.
Yeah, I can't say for sure that it wouldn't. The information from MERS is pretty brief that we've gotten so far, just says when the board adopts it, going forward.
So we have some pending promotions, they're waiting for a decision?
The sergeant promotions came down last week, but not all of them have been promoted. Their effective date has not happened yet. So it would be after, the one is not until April.
Is there an effective date for this MERS action?
Not that's mentioned in the letter at all.
No, I mean, we're,
Because this would,
So
this would come down at
this
the end
is
of
the
April.
practice we have now, is to,
yeah,
when someone is promoted, they take their defined benefit with them.
All right.
So if we do nothing, these people still continue to do that.
Is that
Okay?
true?
that's what we're doing now.
All right, okay.
As far as we understand. Commissioner Gill.
Just, as far as, if we're going to be coming back to this, then maybe a question that I have, and maybe it's just my own not knowing how these things work, would we be I mean, when we're going, when a person would go from a defined benefit to that defined contribution, would they not stack? I mean, you might get locked in at that level of service, or the years of service, but then they still are going to have an investment in it. So essentially, they'd still be, it's not as if they're giving up. It could work out well for them, in fact, in the end.
Well, the real question would be whether they took the years of service when they were under defined benefit, I mean, their salary while they're under defined benefit to determine their pension.
Right.
Or whether they waited 10 or 15 or 20 years later to then kick in, their
Well,
salary at that
And
point.
also, is final average compensation when they left defined benefit, or is it at the end of their career?
Plus whatever they have in the
I think
bank.
we can get answers to those questions,
that-
because
that
that
would be-
certainly would impact
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, that could really impact them, because in essence, if you had, on the opposite, if you had a short-term employee, 4 years, he for sure is gonna get screwed.
Yeah.
I think that, he's gonna be minus his
Commissioner
last
Matzline?
4 years of retirement, and I would predict that they would say, no, I'm not taking that promotion.
Commissioner Masbar, did you have something?
No, I was,
As I mean,
it's been answered, or
okay,
asked.
all right, go ahead.
Dennis, is it possible, I would think these are simple questions, you can just call MERS and get the answer.
Absolutely.
To defer this to Ways and Means?
I'm not sure there are any simple questions or answers when you're talking to MERS, but I think we can,
We can certainly try to do
I mean,
that.
I can certainly
those
try
should be
and
simple
give it to you.
questions.
If I can get an answer, I will absolutely put it on Ways and Means if you want, for
so
next
you're
week.
gonna withdraw your motion
I'll
for
withdraw
the
it,
moment,
and
and Sonny, you're okay
hopefully-
with that? All right.
And then we can defer this to Ways and Means? Is that fine?
Well, or even,
as long
Give
give
her
it-
some time.
even wait until next month. I mean, I don't think, from my discussions with Dennis, I didn't sense any, immediacy to address the problem.
Other than we have pending promotions in the sheriff's
Well, but
department.
we'll keep doing what we've always been doing.
As long as
In April.
we're all comfortable that we're going to continue for these,
Okay.
That's the assumption
pending
I'm making from what I'm hearing
supervision.
here, but we want to make sure we have the details. I'm fine with, I am supportive of allowing them to keep their defined benefit. I'd like to know what the cost of that is, get some idea, but I'd also like to know, I'd also like to have a discussion of them while they're in the middle of this whole thing, this change, because these changes come down every 6 months or a year, they make a new decision. It's just the finality of it. This is a one-time irrevocable change. Well, it's important to dot the i's and cross the t's just to make sure we because, frankly, I don't know that MERS always understands what they're proposing, until afterwards. So I think if we can get it done in a week, we'll bring it back to you. If we
Well,
can't, we'll bring
yeah.
it to you next month.
And again,
Has anyone declined the promotion based on this?
We haven't.
This hasn't
We
been-
haven't changed.
we haven't changed it.
They've all been under the impression that if they were in defined benefit and they got promoted, they'd keep defined benefit. Because up until a couple days ago, that's what we knew.
Okay. Any other comments? Then, we'll bring it back next month.
Or next week if we have answers.
All right, that's fine. Okay, then we go to the funeral bereavement policy. Commissioner Masbar?
Yes, thank you for the information, Dennis and Jen. I did read it, and it does, and, one sentence, please note that if this policy is changed, it will have economic consequences which are required to be negotiated with each of our bargaining groups. Well, that stops you dead in the water. I am sorry that we don't have a means to allow employees, if they lose a coworker, to attend a funeral. I prefer to be a human being, and
Well, Commissioner, I don't know that we've ever denied anybody the ability to go, not that I know of, unless there was a unless there was a scheduling conflict or a problem like that. But I know regularly when we've had employees leave, people take vacation time or personal time and go and attend the funeral.
Well, I understand vacation or personal time, but, thankfully, it happens very rarely.
Mhm.
But I'm of view that if one of those rare occasions does occur, that we should allow coworkers, especially when you stop and think about it, you spend more time with your coworkers often than you do with your own families, and you become family in your work groups. And,
Well, while this says that about the economic issues, I'm certain that we put that in there, they put that in there because they didn't want us reducing down the benefit. If this county board felt that they wanted to add something in there to allow employees to attend funerals of coworkers or coworkers' spouses or something like that, I'm sure there'd be no objection from the unions because you'd be enhancing their benefit. So if the board had a desire to do that, I think you could make that decision and we would take it back to them and I'm sure they would accept it.
But unlike a lot of other operations, we do not have the ability to close down a department or anything else.
Oh, no, I understand
So
that.
it's that everyone in the department could attend a funeral.
I understand
We don't
that.
have that capability.
I would think that we're better off just leave it like it is. Our employees have ample personal time, vacation time, and if they desire to go to the funeral, like Dennis said, they've never been turned down.
Okay. Any other comments on this? All right, then let's move on to under administration, the intergovernmental agreement for senior center.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This agreement has been worked on for several months now, most recently approved by the Commission on Aging Board with some good changes that they recommended. It has been through the City Commission. I think it'll have to go back there with the minor changes that we made based on Commission on Aging action. Commission on Aging has approved it, and we're recommending approval of the agreement.
What changes did the commission?
Oh, they were
Board make?
mostly clarification of issues. There were a couple places where we added in where the city attorney wrote this, and where the city attorney wrote that the county would be responsible to provide certain things if they took certain actions. We said the city will be responsible to provide those same things. It was
Okay.
just kind of equity issues, nothing major.
All right.
Good suggestions, though.
Do I have a motion for approval?
I move we approve.
Support.
Okay, motion second. Any discussion?
Did you want to add anything, Georgia? No?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that brings us to the administrator's update.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, do you want to go through that now, or for the sake of people that are here, do you want to try to get their stuff done? It doesn't matter to me. I just thought it might be easier for those people that are waiting, but it's your call.
It's fine with me. We can take the three items up from the consent calendar and then go to new business. And then from after new business, do the administrator's update. Anybody have any objection to that?
That's fine.
Okay, so looking at the items removed from the consent calendar, let's start with the Road Commission monthly report. Commissioner Goldman?
Yeah, I was wondering if we had any information on the specific additions to the tribal road system.
Well, right now...
Excuse me, could you introduce
Oh,
yourself?
thanks. Mark McKellar with the County Road Commission. Yeah, there's movement. Every time we go through the process of working with the local travel unit, submitting to BIA, we do have a pretty extensive list that we've already developed with the local tribe. And I know two of them that are pending, which is Holiday Road, which we'd all like to see remedied, and Lafreniere. And Lafreniere went on fairly recent. And Lafreniere is going to be rather significant in that the grade going down to South Airport Road, there's going to be some improvement on that. It's pretty steep. But right now, they're pending. We're waiting to hear back. They were recently submitted, and now we're just waiting for a response through our regional office of BIA out of, I think it's Minnesota. And it'll filter back through the travel unit, and we would be notified. So that's where we're at today.
And is, generally, what that does for us is that so that we perhaps get federal dollars to help maintain or rebuild those roads, is that?
Correct. To my knowledge, and I've been investigating this since, January, how this works. We have to work through the local travel unit. We submit, they submit on our behalf after they've gone through and designated the road as a tribal road. Then it goes to the BIA regional office. Ours happens to be out, I think, is Red Lake, Minnesota. And they run it through the process. There's federal transportation funds that the BIA has, and they have to allocate them throughout the United States. And we're in competition with a lot of different tribal units, and I can tell you right now, out west where the larger tribal units are, they're starting to put the pressure on BIA because the more aggressive, smaller tribal units in the east and the Midwest have been taking those funds. So the competition's starting to increase, and so that, of course, reduces our likelihood of getting funds. But what would happen is it could be funds that would be designated for reconstruction, which is terrific in these instances because both these roads are, their ratings are very, very low, and they're at the point where they actually are reconstruction.
The other question I had was on the Cass Road Bridge resolution. Do we have an estimated cost of what it would take to build and the possibility?
Well, the initial estimates are, and I may be incorrect. When we deal with numbers, just off the top of that, I'll just make that statement right now. But initially, it's looking to approximately be about $9 million. Okay. But we are required, or the organization, it's really the road commission, if you notice, it's just a resolution in support. We're not driving this, okay, we're a party to it. But from what I understand from our manager, that she made this statement to the board, and I think Commissioner Thomas was there at that meeting, we were discussing this very thing, because he came up and showed on our map an alternate route, which would alleviate the cost of a bridge. But of course that changes the traffic patterns and so on. But we're obligated, or the organization looking at this is obligated to look at all avenues, all routes, including not putting a replacement bridge there.
In the event that a bridge is replaced or replaces the dam that's there, who bears the fiduciary responsibility?
From my understanding right now, from the road commission perspective, we do not at the road commission. That's personally for me, I'm unclear. We're still talking about this. That's why we support the resolution. But that is a perfectly good question for our manager, because this is relatively new to our board, most of our board members, and we're just in the process of getting to understand this project. And thank goodness it's out into the future to some degree, so we can get a handle on it.
And last question, and that follows from both questions, is the tribal road system. Have they included Cass as a part of their road system?
I believe Cass Road is on the list. It's rather extensive. I'd have to have it right in front of me to give you the exact answer. It's quite extensive. I was surprised when I looked at it.
Thank you.
I guess the comment that I'd make in regard to tribal roads, we in this community have been very fortunate with our partnership with the Grand Traverse Band when it comes to tribal roads. They have received funding through the BIA for, Bates Road, Secor Road, South Long Lake Road, that I can think of right off the top of my head in the last couple of years. Significant construction projects that funding was made available through the BIA that was not available to the Road Commission. and I certainly acknowledge and appreciate the partnership that we have with them, because it truly has allowed us to do safety improvements on roadways in our community that we would not have had funding for without this partnership. And, the expansion of the partnership and the expansion of the list of roads. And, I look at their list of roads, and sometimes I sit back and I wonder, now, how did that road become on their list? But, I'm not exactly sure how they developed the list of what are tribal roads, but I certainly acknowledge and appreciate the partnership that we've developed.
And Jason, if I can, because I've been trying to learn this whole process too, and transportation funding is complex to say the least. But when you're talking about Lafreniere, you're talking about Holiday Road, you're talking about the roads that Sonny just mentioned, these are not federal aid highways, so they're not eligible for federal dollars, basically. By the tribe folks, basically saying, those are tribal roads, it's another way to make them eligible for federal funding. So.
Exactly, Commissioner, exactly. And, we have to do some matching on these. And it's really hard to, some of the state roads, we have to do matching, and it's really hard because it's a large chunk of cash. But when you drive it down to a local road or a primary road like that, and federal funds can be applied, it advances us so much farther in our infrastructure, especially if it's reconstruction, which is what we're looking at in some of these things.
I move we accept the report from the Road Commission.
Support.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Then we have Commissioner Maxbauer, the item B2, which is the consolidating purchasing agreement for custodial chemicals.
Yes, thank you. The reason I pulled this is Commissioner Lemkool requested that we review our janitorial services and whether or not we go out for bidding and contracting. And I'm a firm believer in first things first. What is the value of accepting this bid when, if memory serves me correctly, the bids for contracting services included cleaning supplies? I would hate to go ahead and approve this 3 years out, only to have the board decide to contract janitorial services, which includes cleaning supplies. So.
Good morning, Danny Brown.
Thank you.
Facilities Director.
Michael Green, custodial supervisor.
Well, that's a tough question to answer because,
Good.
I don't know.
I wanted to make your morning.
Or what? I mean,
Danny,
I just
do we
don't
have
know.
the ability to get out of the contract or to discontinue the contract if we don't purchase supplies anymore? Isn't this on a purchase basis when we have to buy them?
It
These are the
is,
prices
yes.
we get. So I'm assuming when we stop buying them, we don't have to pay anymore. It's not a lump sum
Because we have a contract
payment.
with a supplier doesn't mean if we're not buying
Right.
that product, we have to continue to buy it from
It just
them.
defines the unit cost of the project.
Yeah.
And when we bid it out, something like this, typically what we do, I believe, you did this, is we look at what our volume has been in the past. We use that as a basis. We have some
Okay.
comparison of price. That's all we're doing.
All right.
We're not committing ourselves
No.
to so many cases of this, that, the other. And my only other comment is, looking at some of the prices, at least the ones that I'm familiar with from my own business, these are pretty good prices.
Yes, they are.
They're,
And
substantially cheaper
thanks
than
to
what I
Mike,
pay.
He's worked on this diligently for the last 3 months or so, testing products and whatnot. So we've really
Okay.
tried to capture this. This is kind of a tough animal to capture, actually. It's a moving target, is what it is. But I think we got it down pat.
So basically, there's no downside to accepting the prices and dealing with this company, right?
Well, we currently deal with them anyway.
Right.
There's no limitation on when we can discontinue it if we decide, and it locks the prices in, which is
Well,
important
and
for
I
us.
understand too that if the board does change directions and bids out contract services, it doesn't necessarily have to include cleaning supplies. So, but I just wanted to ask the question. So I will move to approve the consolidating purchase agreement for custodial chemicals.
Support.
Commissioner Fleece.
I see in here that it's FOB. Where does the product come out of?
Well, it comes out of their warehouse here in Traverse City.
Why would they make mention of FOB, which is freight? We have to pay the freight, incoming freight. Why would they make mention of it if it was coming in Traverse City? I see they have a billing address at Grand Rapids.
Well, that's their main headquarters, but they have satellite units all over. Muskegon, Lansing, I think they're there,
Manistee.
Manistee.
But all of the product that we would purchase from them would come out of the Traverse City outlet.
Right.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Chairman, I'm sorry, but while Danny's here,
Yes.
I would like to recognize that last week, Danny negotiated a natural gas contract for the county, and I believe he signed his contract. In fact, I know he did. And the savings, if we use the exact amount of gas in 2011 that we used in 2010, the savings on that contract is in excess of $50,000 to Grand Traverse County residents. And I think we need to acknowledge the efforts that are made to negotiate these contracts. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, Sonny.
Yeah, what was our price, Danny? $6 and...
Well, our existing price is 62.
624 in 2010 and 474 in 2011.
Yeah, Sonny does the same contracts. Danny'd be on the phone to Sonny, Danny'd be on the phone to me, I'd talk to Sonny, and then Danny and I would talk every day, and I'd tell him every day, he'd go, "What do you think?" And I'd say, "Lock it." And then he wouldn't. And the next day to go down some more. He did that. And then finally we said, "Okay, we're going to lock it." And he called me the next day, and it was down like 24 more cents from what we thought we were going to lock it at. But I don't even want to know if it's gone down anymore, just.
Don't tell us.
It actually went up a little bit.
All right.
There you go. Hard to find that bottom.
We are at the lowest natural gas price that we've seen in 7 years. I've been signing locked-in contracts for 7 years, and we are at the lowest price we've ever been.
I'm just about to do it for my house, so thank you for that information.
That's going back
All
up
right,
now.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Okay, and that brings us to Commissioner Gilman, the adoption of the board rules.
Yeah, I've actually resolved my question. I move we adopt the board rules as presented in the packet.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Maxbauer?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Henschel?
No.
Inman?
Yes.
Gilman?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes.
Fleece?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes. Okay, motion carries. Okay, now, since I'm skipping all over the map here, I guess that takes us to new business, item A, which would be the Parks and Recreation baseball contract. And there is a note in the packet that was actually written by me, and that was because we had this informal meeting. It was Commissioner Inman, Commissioner Fleece, and me with Parks and Rec Commissioners Peter Doran and Al Larson. And one of the reasons for the meeting was to go over an agenda for the joint meeting that we're going to have. That's next week, isn't it?
The 16th.
The 16th of March on Wednesday night. And one of the items that is going to be on that agenda is a joint discussion of the contract. So I guess the question is, which by the way has not even yet been reviewed by the Parks and Rec Commission itself. So I guess the question is do we want to wait until then, or do you want to start talking about it now? Commissioner Maxbauer.
I think it would be beneficial to wait and discuss it at a later date. But I do have a question for you, Commissioner Fleece and Commissioner Inman. I am the representative on the Parks and Rec Board. I have heard from none of you that this meeting even took place or what was discussed, and I'd like to know why.
Well, it was my understanding it was not a meeting called by me or, I mean, I don't recall how this all happened.
I think it was a meeting requested by the
It was
chairman
requested by the chair and vice chair
Parks
of
Board.
the Parks and Rec Board to basically go over, you know, the agenda for the up-and-coming meeting. So,
I mean, it's a valid question. The meeting, I mean, the reason I got there, the meeting was set, and I asked if I could attend, because, you know, all this stuff coming before RMA.
I mean,
but-
there was certainly, in my view, you know, there's certainly no reason for me to attend or even listen in on teleconference, because I know the three of you are quite capable, but
Yeah.
I guess I feel somewhat disrespected in the fact that I was not even informed that this meeting took place.
Let me assure you, as far as I'm concerned, you weren't intentionally left out, because I would have dinged your bell. But it's probably a good thing you weren't there. That's why we were talking earlier before the meeting. Chairman Inman,
I'm not sure that's a compliment,
Chairman
Commissioner
Inman
Flees.
really got his nose out of joint, if you will.
And did you straighten it for him?
No, I didn't do anything except keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, we all pretty much sat back and watched. Commissioner
I
Billman.
thought we noticed that they were going to have the agenda.
Now, there is a contract apparently that has been floating around. Is that going to be the expected contract presented at this?
I don't honestly know. I've heard, I don't know that much about it myself. Maybe somebody who does can, but there's been so many discussions about, well, there was this contract drafted, but that wasn't what was intended, and so on and so forth. I assume there'll be something in our packet.
The contract that I've seen, and the reason I ask is the contract that I have seen that apparently was proposed or presented by Jason Jones was, it had a number of things in it that you know, we talk about, let's go forward to the Parks meeting and go forward with the agenda and everything, but at the same time, are we going to have a prepared contract there? And my concern is that we're going to have something in front of us that has listed in it a number of responsibilities of the American Legion to do reports, you know, do the surveys afterwards and all. I mean, basically turning it into the government program that it's not.
Well, these are all items that, again, we can hopefully discuss together at this joint meeting, when we actually have some sort of draft contract. Dennis?
I watched the Parks Board meeting where this was presented. First, I want to clarify. The item was presented by the director, but the terms were developed by the president and vice president of the Parks Board along with the director, those tentative terms. Mr. Dorn in the Parks Board meeting clearly stated to the rest of the board that they understand they're under direction from the county board to work this out with American Legion, that they understand the American Legion may not be able to meet the requirements, and they understand some of that stuff would have to go by the wayside, but that they wanted to be able to show what they thought was good to have in all the contracts. So I got the clear impression that they were going to make it so that American Legion could run this program without any onerous responsibilities on them. Having said that, I think you're all aware, under the bylaws, you aren't going to see that contract unless you demand to see that contract. I believe that's a responsibility of the Parks Board.
Well, what should happen, in my opinion, is the Parks Commission should agree on a contract first, and then if this board doesn't agree with the terms of that, three commissioners could ask to review the contract.
Yeah, but normally you wouldn't see it unless you did that. So I think it does make sense, and I expect from what I've gathered that there will be discussion of the contract at next Wednesday's meeting. And, you know, I think that would be an appropriate time for you to make sure they understand your concerns and things you would prefer not to see in that contract. And from everything I can gather, that I think their intention is to kind of do that, at least in my discussions with Pete Dorn. They don't want any, they realize their responsibility is to get a workable contract with the American Legion. And that was the impression I got when Pete came to talk to me about it. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue, but I think it would be important to kind of lay out for them the things that you have concerns about that were in that draft next week.
I did have a question, because 2 years ago, we did review and approve the contract with Little League Baseball, but the difference now is the new rules that we passed last year, is that correct?
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
the county
Yes.
commission did approve the Little League Baseball contract.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons for the changes in the rules, was it wasn't clear what was supposed to be coming to the Board of Commissioners and what was supposed to go just to Parks and Recreation.
And I don't know if it was it Little League? You have a good memory, Commissioner. I mean, we approved the one.
It was Little
It was Little League, okay.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to pass on that I got an email from Jason last week, or excuse me, yesterday, that kind of indicated that the American Legion has now met, at least initially, with you guys, correct?
No.
Oh, you haven't? I thought,
They've agreed verbally to...
Jason?
they've discussed with you the contract, correct? You may not have met.
Jason Jones, Parks and Recreation Director. They've agreed verbally to the terms that were presented. We did not present any agreement, and I did not present any agreement to this board or make a suggestion for any agreement to any board member at any time. What we presented to American Legion were terms that have not been put into any type of formal agreement at this point that's been approved by Parks and Recreation Commission. And American Legion did agree to those terms verbally. We're moving forward with drafting an agreement. Bob's going to draft that for us, and then it will go to the Parks and Rec Commission on the 17th.
Jason, thank you for the two contracts that are in the packet. I don't see a contract with, for instance, the YMCA. They have baseball games at our facilities, do they not?
We don't have an agreement. We don't have a long-term agreement with the YMCA. The YMCA is a season-by-season agreement, and they just rent the fields from us.
So they just have a rental agreement?
We just reserve the fields for them in the evenings during their season. We've never had an agreement with YMCA.
So the YMCA does not have to sign a contract, but the American Legion does?
That's correct.
I see.
It would seem to me that they all should. There should be an agreement with anybody who rents from us.
Commissioner Flees?
That was my understanding from the meeting we had the other day, was some groups had contracts, some didn't. And I would like to see the Parks and Rec Commission, they can review that so that we treat everybody equally and alike. I don't know why you'd have one group that you would and one group you wouldn't, and it's probably from years ago, but I just think it's something we need to look at. I mean, the Parks and Recs need to look at it.
And honestly, I raised the question of, at this meeting, why don't we just use the contract we had before with American Legion? And of course, the answer was, we didn't have a contract before with American Legion. So, yeah, this question of who's just a straight rental and who actually has a contract to run a program is still, I'm still not sure about that.
And while you're negotiating or while you're writing up a contract, I mean, shouldn't this be considered? And you're negotiating this and you're writing up this contract and you say you've got a verbal agreement with the American Legion. However, we're supposed to be going forward on the 16th and we're going to be talking with the Parks Board about this kind of stuff. Well, then it seems like we're jumping the shark here. Now, if there isn't an agreement with the YMCA, for example, the point is, if we are just renting space, we're renting space. It's a rental agreement. It shouldn't be too complicated, other than they're responsible to maintain their end of the bargain and leave a decent field, not tear it up too much or wreck the facilities. And we provide them with the space. I don't think that's all too complicated. And from what I saw, and from what I saw that you were presenting, it had all kinds of strings, government strings, and requirements they're ludicrous. In my opinion, I think they're ludicrous.
Well, those terms were not decided by me. Those terms were decided by the leadership of the Parks and Recreation Commission.
But you're negotiating.
I didn't present those. I never presented an agreement to this commission. That agreement was presented.
First of all, I agree. I think everyone should have a similar agreement. I mean, I do agree that if a YMCA or Little League doesn't have an agreement, we should have a rental agreement with them. This has become more complicated, frankly, in my opinion, by the action of the board. Okay? Because your action was to forgive their past payments. Your action was to charge them only half of actual costs.
For the first year.
For the first year, and then to only charge them actual cost in future years. Okay? That is different than we have with the Y. It is different than we have with the other groups. They pay a fee, not actual cost. We've already received letters from the Y, and we received letters from Breakers saying, we're in dire financial straits. We would like to get the same deal as the American Legion and pay actual costs. Now, this goes completely contrary to the feeling I've heard from the board that these programs have to help pay for themselves, and the budget of the Parks Department has to come down. I don't know how we charge people less so that we can't make a profit to support the programs and still bring the budget into a neutral cost. Now we've got these other groups, and we don't. It's going to be the Parks Board is going to have to handle this. We've got these other groups all now petitioning to pay only actual costs. And so while I agree with you that that we shouldn't treat American Legion differently, the board made a decision to treat American Legion differently. And I'm not saying I agree with all the terms that they came up with to negotiate. But I guess I would say two things. First, what happened to us last year, and I say us because the Parks Department is part of the county, this was dumped in the Parks' lap at the last minute, whether you agree with it or you don't agree with it, and they had to scramble to put a program together. And the one thing that the county board and the American Legion said very clearly was, do this quickly to give us as much time to put this program together as possible. That's the reason that they continue to negotiate, because they want to be able to give American Legion time to get the staff hired, to get the equipment, to get the umpires. So that's the only reason, Commissioner, this is moving forward. And I would think, and I stand to be corrected, but I would think that if American Legion and the Parks Board on the 16th have an agreement that they're both comfortable with, I don't know why the county board would want to interfere with that.
I would posit that if it were a simple rental agreement, we'd all be in agreement to let it go. I mean, I imagine that if it were a simple rental agreement, we wouldn't even be talking about it. It's that simple.
Yep.
It would just happen. You know, I don't see, you know, you've gotten direction from the board. The first year we do it half. And from there on, it's actual cost. You know?
Well, it actually was more complicated than that, because at the same time, it was just a question of renting the fields to American Legion. We couldn't rent the fields to American Legion. But at the same time, you directed that the county had to abandon its program, even though it wasn't a money-losing program. Commissioner Inman, then Max Barr.
Well, believe me, Jason, all your issues that you feel very strongly about, Commissioner Fleece and Commissioner and I took full force without doing bodily harm during that meeting. And, you know, I think the chair and vice chair walked away from the meeting understanding, you know, initially our concerns about raising all these other items up where other contracts don't have them in. And I think one of the benefits of having this joint meeting is that we had planned on discussing, as long as everybody wants to, you know, each and one of these components that they feel strongly should be not only in the American Legion contract but in other contracts, and their rationale behind it. And I said, you know, in all fairness, let's give your due, you know, your due in court in terms of, you know, how you feel and why you feel, in terms of a philosophy standpoint, in terms of what, you know, should be going in these contracts moving forward with all user groups, and we'll have a broad discussion about it with the county commission during the study session, and then hopefully we can come away at the end of the meeting with some kind of an agreement. So, you know, it's been addressed, and I think that they walked away knowing that we're going to have an extensive discussion about contracts with all user groups and what's reasonable in terms of our expectations to be in a contract. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to put this joint meeting together. So.
Well, first I would argue with your conclusion, Commissioner Richardson, that baseball made a profit. First of all, we do not full cost anything in this county. And and Dennis, when you say actual costs, I asked Dean if the cost of labor for the facilities crews is distributed to different departments. And the answer was no.
No, you're correct.
And so how, you determine actual costs, what are you going to use?
Well, we're going to keep track of the hours that they work, cutting the grass, marking the fields, doing those things.
Let's hope it's not more.
And I have a question for Jason. As long as the YMCA does not have a contract, if I'm not mistaken, rugby uses our fields at Civic Center, do they not?
They do.
Do they have a contract? Or do they pay a fee?
They do pay a fee. We have a standard permit that we put together, just like we do for the pool or any other facility like that. We send them a permit with a bill attached to it.
So it's a kind of a rental agreement?
So we do have some, if we're talking about permitting, we send YMCA a permit with a bill attached to it at the end of the season for the games that they have. We don't have a formal agreement like we have with ICE and with T-Bays because they're not scheduling and managing the fields. We're managing the fields for the games associated with YMCA, and the same thing with rugby. Therefore, we take the reservation for events for rugby, and we block out reservations for YMCA, and then we bill them at the end of the season with those permits. So there are two separate issues that we have here. The agreements you have in your packets today for T-Bays and for ICE, those agreements are to manage facilities in addition to programming events and activities. The YMCA, American Legion, those are typically different because we handle those through our registration system. And that's part of the reason we don't have a formal agreement with the YMCA.
Are there any other
or rugby?
Are there any other groups that you can think of that use our facilities that I'm seeing a great deal of inconsistency here?
We have agreements with T-Bays, we have agreements with ICE to manage facilities and run programs within those facilities. All of our other agreements are through our registration system.
What other agreements besides rugby and YMCA?
This would be any softball or baseball that occurs on the fields, any rugby, any pavilion rentals, any meeting room rentals out at Twin Lakes, any rentals at Twin Lakes, any campground reservations on Power Island. These are the smaller ticket items that we handle through our registration system.
What about
and that's
breakers?
The way we've handled those things.
What about breakers, for example?
We handle them through a registration system as well.
So they don't have a contract either?
They don't have a contract. You're absolutely right.
And the high school swim teams neither.
Correct.
Yeah, it would seem that to be something
the way
to
we've
review.
handled this. That's the way we've handled this for years, and it's always been appropriate for this board and for the Parks and Recreation Commission, so we've continued this way.
Yeah.
We have a more formalized agreement, and that's what we're working on with American Legion because of the challenges we've had over the past year.
I think you should be looking at it with all of them, I think. Talk with Bob about it, because it just seems there should be a rental agreement.
Right.
There should be provisions for everybody.
Well, that was our position in the discussion we had with the chair and the vice chair, and I apologize to Commissioner Max Bauer. I apologize if we missed making that announcement. I thought we did, but that meeting was called by the chair and the vice chair for Parks and Rec that they wanted to visit with Larry and I just for a few minutes to go over the agenda
And
item.
again, I have no problem with you attending the meeting. I just think it's a matter of respect that you at least let the county commissioner who sits on the board
Yeah, I would have thought that Parks and Rec would
know that a meeting is taking place
Did
and
Parks and Rec-
afterwards what was discussed.
Parks and Rec make an announcement that they were having a joint meeting with the chair and vice chair?
Not with me.
Okay, all right. Okay.
All right, so we're all good to, obviously, we're going to have a good discussion in a week.
Yeah, right.
This could be...
Are we going to start early?
Be one of those late meetings. All right, moving on to Commissioner Inman, discussion of order and duration of public comment.
I just want to let you know I received a public comment from a city resident after our last board meeting regarding does the county have a protocol for applause, ongoing, continuing applauses during public comment. And I just reflected back, I reviewed the rules, and it's just basically that the chairman is to maintain the order. I did check with the city mayor, and they do not have anything that really directly prohibits a showing of emotion or applause other than disorderly conduct. And so they do not have that They do not have that in their rules. However, they do have a soft request of individuals making public comment that if there's ongoing applause, that they would ask them to refrain from that. So not knowing where the ground rules really were, and not knowing that we didn't really have anything in writing, and I'm not particularly offended by people showing emotion or applauding during public comment. I just wanted to bring that up, that, if you have any questions about, questions or comments that you want on that, in terms of how the chairman conducts the meeting, whether that's allowable, or you would ask that not be done, I'd just ask you to relay that to me.
Commissioner Fleece?
I think the way Chairman handled it at our last meeting was fine.
Okay.
If it gets to where it's interrupting the meeting, I'm sure the chairman would put an end to it, but I don't see, I've been to a lot of meetings where they've said there's no applauding, but I've never seen the means behind it.
Right.
I think you handled it fine.
Okay, all right, good. That's all I wanted to check with you.
Any other comments? All right, that takes us to the administrator's update.
Thank you. Negotiations continue. Thank you, Bob. We only have a couple of negotiations still underway. Circuit Court Association, corrections sergeants, and the corrections unit itself. Yesterday, we completed a tentative agreement with the corrections unit, and that's been a long work in progress. Hopefully, it'll get support. We had a mediator in to work on it, and hopefully they'll be voting on it here soon, and we'll be bringing you a contract for your consideration. Today we meet on economics with the corrections sergeants. So those keep moving forward. We'll have the analysis on the health building comparison for you at Ways and Means next week. Just finished that up yesterday, so I'm looking forward to that discussion. I met with Bruce Ramay, our building construction code director. The good news is building permits are up about 3% this year compared to last year. This continues a trend of last fall of building permits up. I've talked to several contractors who say they're getting busier, so that's good news for the community. And while I think we have 10 people laid off in that department, it doesn't look like we'll have to lay any more off at this point in time because we're getting busier. But we watch that on a monthly basis to make sure that people are busy and when we have adequate staff. One thing that I proposed to Garfield Township about 2 years ago that I think I'd like to resurrect is a discussion again about merging our building departments. In this economy, they're the only ones that have a building department, and it just seems like that's a discussion to take place to see if we can do it in a more efficient manner than what we're doing it now, especially in these times when the business is down. So I'm going to have a discussion with Chuck Korn again to see if I can see if he has any interest in looking at possibly a way to merge those two departments again. We do the buildings for everybody else in the county except Fife Lake, which is very small. So I'm going to talk to Chuck again about that. Bob Osterhout and Scott Howard and I are working on looking at a reorganization of the Resource Recovery Department. We're evaluating what and how we can move that department directly under the county board, take it away from, or take it out from underneath the Board of Public Works. I just don't really see the value of it being under Board of Public Works. And so we're working on that. We found that legally it can be done, but of course the county plan and the ordinance, which is being worked on now, I understand, Sonny, both refer to the Resource Recovery Council. So we're working through some details on how we can make that transfer. At least the old board was interested in moving the Resource Recovery Department under the county, taking out from the auspices of Board of Public Works, because it's really, while it had some validity when we were running big programs like drop-offs, we're no longer doing, its validity of being under Public Works really is lessened, and I think it makes more sense to follow kind of the guidelines that the county board had talked to us about before, which would be bring it right under the county board again. So we're investigating that and expect in the next month or two we'll be bringing you some analysis and recommendation on that. Last week we held a meeting with the TCAP school superintendent, with the city manager, myself, and some of the staff to put together a list of items that we thought we might be able to either A, consolidate, B, contract together, or C, contract from each other, as a cost-saving measure. I want to say we came up in our initial meeting with about 25 items that we think have potential to be look at new ways to do these services. We've listed them out into 4 or 5 general categories, and we're going to set work teams up that will have staff members from each of the 3 organizations, and they'll be charged with evaluating each of those groups, seeing if there's potential and what the options are for providing services together or contracting services together to get a better bang for the buck, those kinds of things. It was a really good meeting. We had a lot of good ideas, I think. I'm sure when these work groups get together, we're going to ask them to see what else is out there that we may not be thinking of. I brought Danny Brown in, and Dean Bott was involved in it from our side, and I think it's fair to say we're all 3 very excited about it and interested in seeing what could be done. So we're going to develop that further over the next upcoming months, and you may even see some proposals by budget time of things that we might do together. So wanted to pass that on to you. Tuesday we had a meeting. The sheriff invited me to a meeting with the townships that provide supplemental police services. They wanted to talk about the contracts that we have with them. The contracts, some of the contracts are still from 1998, all the way up to 2005 or 2003. So the first thing that we said is we want to modernize all the contracts and get them all standardized. They're not now. But I think it's fair to say that the townships were really there to talk about the fact that it's costing too much and that they think the county should pay a bigger part of this. And I think I was there to take the brunt of that, since the sheriff and the sheriff will tell you, as he told them, if you believe that this should be done differently. It was the old argument, I'm already paying taxes, especially up in Peninsula. I'm already paying this, why am I paying it again, to have more police officers? And we explained that the sheriff is going to use the police officers that we can afford to have where he needs them most. And that this program, while it started with grant funding, this program is a program that is allowing local units to provide additional supplementary services if they so choose. And that's how they all went into this program. And we tried to make it clear that it's at their discretion, and if they don't want it, they don't have it. And of course, some of their positions are, well, we don't think we should pay for it, and we should have it, And we just said, there's no way the county can afford, 19 additional officers. And so we had a really good discussion, and it was a very positive discussion. They asked me what would happen if they all said no. And I said, I had no idea. I said, I know that police and safety is a very important issue to the county board. I said, just off the top of my head, probably what I would recommend, at least initially, would be to take whatever resources we're putting towards that program and put it towards full-time officers. It's about $600,000 a year, and I said to him that would mean about 6 additional officers. So we would go from 19 supplemental down to 6 full-time officers, and what it meant was you'll each see less officers, a lot more. And so they kind of understood. I said, I have no idea what the county board would do with that, but I explained to them our budget situation, and they're all in the same situation. So it was a very good discussion. The one area that I think we will explore together, and I won't preclude the fact that they may ask you for something different. The one area that we may explore together is some of them have indicated a desire to be able to purchase additional time from us, but only on an as-need basis. So, for example, Peninsula I'll use as an example because they're the ones who are most active in this. While they have a full-time officer, that officer has to be gone for whatever vacation time they have, when they're sick, training, things like that, and they might be gone in week chunks where there's nobody there. And they're saying, we might want to pay to have somebody come in and supplement. And so we had a good discussion about that, and just as one idea, what we came up with was an idea of, well, we could have an overtime pool of our officers that might be willing to go in there and supplement that. We had some good discussion about it. Nate Alger, our undersheriff, said that costs about $45 an hour. And so one of the things we discussed that we would be willing to explore would be what it would cost if the county had the same community police arrangement in that system that we have with them, so that roughly we pay 25% of the cost. The idea here being, would the county be willing to subsidize that $45 an hour rate by 25%, dropping the hour rate,